So while following a bunch of the big wrestling stories that have been going on lately, a lot of it's been based around some of the later season meets that are going on before the conference championship. So one of the stories that came up that was really interesting to me was the story about how expensive tickets are right now for the national championships. Now, obviously, it looks like wrestling as a whole is growing a lot. There's a lot of interest that's gaining online. If you look at all the videos that the Big Ten Network puts up as far as matches go and look at all the views they get, it's actually showing that there's a lot of interest in wrestling online. Surprisingly for me, with this channel, as you can tell by the name MMA Rundown, my intention with the channel was I'm an MMA fan, but I do follow other specific combat sports like jujitsu and like wrestling. So if there's a jiu-jitsu specific thing to talk about or a wrestling specific thing to talk about, I'll make videos for that too. But the wrestling videos tend to just outrank the jiu-jitsu videos and even the MMA videos by some large multiples. And I think the reason why is because there's a lot of people who actually are interested in wrestling, and that's something that I've seen kind of grow a lot recently. So with that being said, for the national championships, part of the reason why these tickets are so expensive when I go through the prices is because there's a limited number of seats that they have in these arenas, and they have some allotments for some universities. So there's a smaller amount that the general public can actually gain access to. But even still, the prices for what's essentially just a large wrestling tournament is still pretty shocking and pretty surprising. So from the site that the NCAA redirects you to, for an all session ticket, an all session would mean 6 sessions. The cheapest one you can get is $800. So that averages out to, I believe, what would that be? Probably like 140, 130, 140, I think, per session. If you look at session one, the cheapest one is $112, $103 for session two, 120 for session three, and this is just the cheapest one. I'll go into session six to go through like what all the options are. 382 for session four, 225 for session five, and then 380 for session six, which is the championship session. If you go into session six and look at some of the options they actually have there, like we're looking at $450, 540, 540, 585, 630, 675. I think it goes all the way up to around 1,000. This is before you have to pay the fees too, because these are secondary market sites, so they'll have I guess Ticketmaster, even if they're in primary market, they have their own fees too. But one ticket for this session can cost you well over $1,000 after the fees. And on one hand, it's good that they're in a position where there's so much demand that they can actually charge that price. It'll be interesting to see as we get closer to nationals how the prices change. It'll be interesting to see if there are any last minute changes on prices. Because with Pittsburgh's in Western Pennsylvania, so you have to wonder for the people who are actually going to be traveling out there, are these people planning to go by plane or going by car? If you're going by car, it's a little bit easier to cancel out last second if maybe you were expecting to see a lot of your guys on your team in the finals and then they get upset early and you're no longer interested. Maybe people are trying to rush off ticket sales at that point. I'm not sure how that's going to work exactly. You kind of have to wait and see. In my experience with the PPG Paints Arena, I've actually been there a couple times. Completely unrelated to wrestling, I'm actually a really big Pittsburgh Penguins fan. I don't live in Pennsylvania, but I've had to make it out for a couple games. Really nice arena. I don't know what it would be like from a wrestling standpoint. If you want to have an idea of what the visuals are like, this is a video from the Stanley Cup Finals. So I guess this would be like a video of a takedown happening. So if you're in a wrestling meet, maybe this is one ring here, and you have like one here, and then further down the line. Yeah, so that would be like what a takedown might look like from there. But the views are actually pretty solid from there. Um, this was actually in the second row, pretty high up, so I can still see it pretty well. So no matter what seat you get there, even if it's one of the nosebleed seats, so to speak, you're still probably gonna get a pretty decent view. So there's some value in the tickets, but even still, at the price that they're at, it's pretty surprising to me. Um, I think it's see the problem is that since we're still a month out, it's hard to speculate on whether these prices are going to go up from here or if it's going to go down. It really does seem like there's a lot of demand from a lot of people, and in wrestling, especially at the collegiate level, a lot of times the fans that go are people who used to wrestle when they were younger, got out of school. A lot of times because you were a wrestler, you have a lot of it builds a lot of positive character traits that transfer over well into the business world. So a lot of these people end up having a decent amount of money. Plus, they have the strong interest for wrestling, so they're willing to spend what these prices are to actually go to a game or go to a big meet. So to me, even though these prices are high, I don't think that they're going to reach a point where no one's buying it and they have to bring the prices down. I think that this might actually be a price point that people are reaching. Even if you look at StubHub, which is another secondary market option, if this wants to load up, some of these lower prices are still pretty cheap. So 825 for the full session, 99 for session one. But even still, like these are all expensive. And to go back to the example I actually had here, this is a Stanley Cup final game. I paid $300 for this ticket for Game 5 of the Stanley Cup Finals. So to put that into perspective, for college wrestling, you know that there's going to be college wrestling championship every year. If you're a fan of Iowa, if you're a fan of Penn State, you know you're going to have some representatives pretty much every year. So there's not quite the same rarity. Whereas in hockey, your team can go forever and never play in a Stanley Cup final. I think the St. Louis Blues may have played in like one or two finals in 50 years. The Predators, this was their first final. The Penguins are a little bit more successful. I think in Nashville the ticket prices were a lot more expensive, but still, for Stanley Cup final tickets to be cheaper than what these National Wrestling Championship finals are going to be, or National Wrestling Championship final tickets are going to be, I think is actually pretty surprising. But I think it really goes to show that there's a lot of interest in wrestling right now, and hopefully what this means is that we're actually going to start getting more viewership on live events. One of the things that I don't really fault Flow for it because they kind of had to do it, but what's been good about Flow is that they've actually been able to cover and stream a lot of live events that we never really had streamed before. The downside is that they have a pretty hefty paywall and it has to be expensive because in the past there wasn't a huge demand for wrestling. So if you only have say 100,000 people that are possible fans, and you have certain costs for going out to the events, streaming it, paying the people to do all that work, you kind of have to charge a little bit more to cover all your costs. So I don't really hold it against them that it's expensive, but on the other hand, if you're having to pay $25 a month for Flow versus say $5 a month for ESPN Plus, I can understand why people are unhappy about that. So hopefully what we're seeing is a sign of more people getting into wrestling, a lot more people who are becoming fans of wrestling. And then as a result, maybe in the future we're going to have more access. Ticket prices might go down. And then from the ticket prices going down, it's just going to kind of snowball in the right direction. So I guess I'll just leave it at that. I'll keep following this story. I'll see how it goes. Closer to around the time of the Big Ten tournament, see if the prices go up, go down, stay pretty similar, and then obviously I'll be watching the national championships from home. I'll be watching on the ESPN app and doing some videos on that as well. Do some preview videos, do some videos in post, talking about what happened. And I guess just to end it here, if you're into hockey, this is a moment from the stands. If you follow right down here, this is Marc-Andre Fleury. That's the last moment that he skated on Penguin ice in a Penguins uniform. So if you're a Penguin fan, kind of a sad moment for you. Sad for me, definitely.